Good morning, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Terri Sewell. I proudly represent Alabama's 7th Congressional District, which includes the historic cities of Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, and my hometown of Selma, Alabama. I want to thank our colleagues for being here and joining me this morning. I'm grateful to have their support and the support of the entire House Democratic Caucus as we take action to protect our sacred right to vote. Today, as we prepare to commemorate the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday and the historic march from Selma to Montgomery, we do so at a very perilous time in our democracy. Sadly, we know that the values that guided John Lewis and those foot soldiers across the Edmund Pettus Bridge are under assault. Seemingly every day, we see new efforts to roll back our hard-fought progress, efforts to whitewash our history, and yes, efforts to make it harder for Americans to vote. Without the protections of the Voting Rights Act, those efforts are going unchecked in state legislatures across this country. In 2024, state legislators proposed at least 317 bills to make it harder for Americans to cast their ballot, and almost 20 of those bills were signed into law. Meanwhile, here in Washington, House Republicans are working hard to advance legislation that would disenfranchise millions of eligible voters, including married women and Americans with military and tribal IDs. Americans shall see these laws for what they are, an attack on our democracy and an attempt to silence the voice of the people. Long lines, closed polling stations, voter rolls are being purged, and the list goes on and on. While these new laws may not make us count how many marbles are in a jar, I have to say that modern-day efforts and modern-day barriers to voting are no less pernicious than those poll tax and literacy tests of the past. 60 years may have passed since John Lewis and those foot soldiers were bludgeoned on that bridge in Selma, but we know the fight for voting rights is just as urgent today as it was then. That's why today, with the help and support of every House Democrat, I am proud to say that we reintroduced H.R. 14, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Our bill would restore and modernize the protections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It would give us the tools we need to address modern-day voter suppression and ensure that every American can cast their ballot fairly and freely. Voting rights should not be a partisan issue. We should all agree that our democracy is strongest when every American who is eligible to vote has access to the ballot box. Let us not forget that since the passing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized 5 times with large bipartisan majorities and under 3 Republican presidents, most recently in 2006 by George Bush. While my Republican colleagues have abandoned that bipartisan tradition, this Congress provides a new opportunity for them to stand alongside us as we fight for the American people and the values that John Lewis fought so bravely and so tirelessly to advance. Never did I think that 60 years after John was bludgeoned on a bridge, that the cause for which John Lewis and those foot soldiers march would be our cause too. 60 years later. It goes to show that progress is elusive, and every generation must fight to hold on to the progress of the past and to try to advance it, or lest we lose it. Well, we here in the House Democratic Caucus, we believe fervently that John Lewis and those foot soldiers' sacrifice was not in vain. We will continue to file the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act because we know that the Shelby versus Holder decision gutted it in 2013. And since 2013, we House Democrats have filed this bill in every successive Congress, and we do so now in the 119th Congress. We do so on the wake, in the cusp of the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, of the march from Selma to Montgomery, and of Bloody Sunday. I want to thank all of my colleagues for joining me. We know, as John said, that ours is not the fight of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is truly the fight of a lifetime. And we will stand boldly with the American people to ensure that the sacred right to vote is protected and that every American who is eligible to vote has access to the ballot box. I want to again thank all of my colleagues for joining me, and I want to